Am I wrong for ordering water at dinner even if I didn't finish it? My spouse and I earn a comfortable living and generally keep our expenses modest, but we're currently on a winter getaway at a high-end mountain resort. The trip costs several thousand euros for the week and includes breakfast and dinner, though drinks at dinner are extra. One thing that stood out to me was that the restaurant charges a few euros for a litre of plain tap water, sourced from a local mountain spring. I think it's overpriced, but it hasn't ruined the vacation for me. I have a respiratory condition that tends to leave me especially thirsty after long days outdoors in cold mountain air. At dinner one evening, my partner joked that the amount of water I drank cost as much as filling our swimming pool back home. We ordered a bottle of wine and a jug of water when we sat down, and partway through the meal I ordered another jug, just like the night before. When my partner returned from the restroom and saw the extra water on the table, he looked visibly irritated. He didn't touch the water for the rest of the meal. After dessert, I finished my wine and ice cream, and there was still about 1 glass of water left in the jug. He asked if I planned to drink it, and I said no, I was full and no longer thirsty after the multi-course dinner. That's when he scolded me for ordering more water if I wasn't going to finish every drop. He poured himself a glass, drank it quickly, and said I should have asked before ordering more, even though our young child's glass had also been empty earlier. I told him I felt he was being petty and that I'm an adult who can order water when I'm thirsty. I also said I shouldn't be made to feel guilty for leaving a small amount behind when everyone at the table had already had enough. Now I'm wondering if I was actually in the wrong for ordering another jug of water for the table, knowing I'd like to drink most of it myself but might not finish it entirely. Am I wrong for refusing a sleepover with kids I don't know in my home? I'm a woman in my early 30s, and I share a young child with my former partner, a man a couple of years older than me. We separated more than 2 years ago, and the split wasn't amicable. Our communication is strictly limited to matters involving our child, and that arrangement works best for me. I know very little about his personal life beyond the basics. He's in a new relationship with a woman I've met exactly once, and she has several children of her own whom I've never met. The only reason I even know these children exist is because my child talks about them occasionally and once showed me a birthday card they all signed. I don't know their exact ages, only that they're all in elementary school and older than my child. I've never interacted with them, never spoken to their mother, and have no real information about their routines, needs, or personalities. I'm comfortable with this distance and have never felt the need to change it. Recently, my child's bedroom was renovated with a fun, game-themed design he's very proud of, and he's talked about it a lot. He's already had one overnight guest before, a close relative from his father's side of the family whhom I know well and trust completely. Because of that, my former partner approached me with the idea that 2 of his partner's children should come to my home for a sleepover. I immediately said no. I'm not opposed to sleepovers in general, but only in very limited circumstances. I'm not even ready to host overnight stays for my child's closest friends yet, let alone children I've never met. I don't feel comfortable taking responsibility for kids whose parents I don't know and whose needs and boundaries I'm unfamiliar with. To me, that feels like an unreasonable expectation. My ex pushed back, saying that I know him well enough and that the children are now siblings, so they should have shared experiences together. That argument didn't reassure me at all. I pointed out that they already sleep under the same roof when my child is with him, so they are not missing out on bonding time. He accused me of being cruel and said I was creating unnecessary divisions by not allowing his partner's kids to experience staying in my child's newly decorated room. I explained that it's just a bedroom, not a special event, and even suggested that if he wanted all the kids to have a similar experience, he could redesign a room in his own home. That suggestion didn't go over well. What matters most to me is that my child understands my boundaries and feels secure. When I explained that the sleepover wouldn't be happening, he accepted it without argument and hasn't brought it up again. He seems perfectly content spending time with his step-siblings when he's at his father's house. Still, the situation has left me wondering whether I'm being unfair or simply protecting my space and my responsibilities as a parent. Was I wrong for prioritizing my babysitter's emergency over my child's sports expenses? I'm a single mother raising 3 children on my own, a 9-year-old son, a 5-year-old daughter, and a 3-year-old toddler. During the work week, I rely on a babysitter named Riley who picks the kids up from school and daycare and stays with them until I get home. She usually works somewhere between 12 and 15 hours a week and has been reliable and great with the kids. One important detail is that Riley has a severe allergy to tree nuts. We've always taken that seriously in my home. We keep an EpiPen available for her, and the only product containing tree nuts we ever have is a chocolate spread that's strictly reserved for weekends when she isn't working. Everyone involved is aware of this, including my ex. One weekend, the kids were at their father's place. When they came back, he had packed their lunches with a trail mix that apparently contained nuts. During the week, while Riley was unpacking their lunchboxes, she had an allergic reaction. She tried calling me, but I'm not allowed to have my phone on me at work. She then called our emergency contacts, including my neighbour and my partner, but no one answered. At that point, Riley stayed calm, packed up a bag with snacks, toys, and her medication, loaded all 3 kids into her car, and drove herself and then to the emergency room. Thankfully, everything turned out okay. By the time I arrived, she'd been treated, the kids were fed, distracted, and safe, and the situation was under control, though understandably stressful for everyone. I told Riley to take the rest of the week off with pay and sent her an extra $250 as a bonus for handling such a frightening situation responsibly while caring for my kids. I also told her I would cover the cost of replacing her EpiPen and any hospital bills related to the incident. The issue is that I had originally set that money aside for my oldest child. He had just started a youth football program, and that fund was meant to cover his uniform, cleats, and other related costs. Since the money was gone, I reached out to my ex and asked if he could cover those expenses instead. He refused, saying that this was exactly what his child support payments were meant for. I explained that the money had gone toward a medical emergency that happened while his children were in my care, and that the emergency was caused by him packing food containing nuts after being told about the allergy. He became angry and accused me of misusing child support funds, even threatening legal action. I told him he was free to pursue that if he wanted, but in the meantime he could either help pay for the football expenses or accept that our son wouldn't be able to participate this season. Now he's telling anyone who will listen that I'm irresponsible and a bad mother for giving money to a babysitter instead of spending it on our child. I'm left wondering whether I truly handled this wrong, or whether I simply responded the best I could to an emergency situation that put both my babysitter and my kids at risk. Was I wrong for refusing my IELTS challenge and turning it back on her? I enjoy knitting and usually make things only for myself or my partner because it takes time, skill, and expensive materials, and I've learned that handmade items aren't always appreciated once they leave my hands. Because of that, I generally don't knit gifts for other people. One afternoon, my mother-in-law decided to present me with what she dramatically called a challenge. She showed me a photo on her phone and explained that the challenge was for me to knit her a specific designer-style scarf to match an outfit she owned, framing it as if she were testing my abilities rather than simply asking for a favour. I asked her why she was calling it a challenge when it sounded like a straightforward request for me to make her something. She couldn't really explain and just repeated that I could try if I was up to it. I talked to my partner about it later, and he suggested I just say no outright, but I felt awkward doing that and decided to compromise instead. I asked her to send me a photo of the outfit, went to a local yarn shop, picked out yarn in a suitable colour, grabbed a pair of knitting needles from my own supplies, and also bought a beginner knitting guide. The next time I saw her, I gave her the yarn, needles, and book and told her that this was everything she needed to make the scarf herself, aside from buying the pattern. I said I thought it would be more fitting for her to take on the challenge personally and learn to knit so she could make exactly what she wanted. She looked confused and disappointed and made a comment implying that I must not have been able to figure it out, even though I clarified that I'd already made similar scarves before. She didn't argue with me directly, but later she complained to my partner, saying she had only given me a fun challenge and that I hadn't even tried. He told her that it was ultimately my decision. Since then, she's been posting vague comments online about not understanding younger people and why everything has to be made so complicated. I didn't intend to start drama, but I also didn't want to commit to hours of unpaid work. Was I actually out of line for handling it this way? Was I wrong for refusing to translate after being put on the spot again? I'm a 19-year-old guy who's fluent in another language because it's spoken in my family. A friend of mine, Leo, is the same age and has been learning this language for years, but in reality he only knows a handful of phrases and can't hold a real conversation. The problem is that he constantly tells people he speaks it, and the moment someone actually starts talking to him, he turns to me and expects me to jump in and translate so he doesn't look bad. At first it felt harmless. We'd be out somewhere, he'd overhear someone speaking the language say a confident sentence, and they'd respond naturally. Then he'd just stare at me like I was supposed to rescue him. I'd translate a bit to smooth things over because I didn't want strangers to feel awkward. After this happened several times, I finally asked him to stop. I told him that if he wanted to practice, he should just say he's learning instead of claiming fluency and turning me into his personal interpreter. He brushed it off, laughed, and said I was being dramatic, adding that it was good practice for him and a cool skill for me. Last weekend things hit a breaking point. We were at a birthday gathering at a bar, and he started chatting with a couple at the next table. When he found out they spoke the language, he immediately told them that he did too, then pointed at me and said we could all talk together. The couple got excited and started speaking quickly, and almost immediately he began doing his usual thing, turning to me mid-conversation and telling me what to say for him. I tried to keep it light at first and told him in English that I wasn't translating the night, but he ignored it and kept pushing lines at me while the couple awkwardly waited. At that point, I'd had enough. I told the couple, in their language, that I wasn't translating right now, smiled, and walked away to get a drink. He followed me angry, saying I embarrassed him and made him look like a liar. He insisted I could have just helped for a couple of minutes and corrected him later. I reminded him that I've corrected him later many times before, and he keeps doing this anyway. Now he's calling me petty and saying real friends wouldn't do that to each other, and I'm stuck wondering if I actually handled this wrong or if I just finally set a boundary he didn't like. Was I wrong for skipping the party and asking to be paid after the time change? A few weeks ago, a friend of mine asked if I could make handmade chocolates for her child's first birthday party. She said she would reimburse me for the ingredients, but because the process is expensive and extremely time-consuming, I decided on my own that I would treat the chocolates as a birthday gift instead of asking for any money. I never told her that explicitly, but in my mind, the time, effort, and cost would be my contribution. I spent almost an entire day preparing everything. I was in the kitchen from morning into the evening, and then woke up very early the next day to finish the final steps so everything would be fresh. The invitation said the party started at 9:00 am. And the plan had always been a brunch-style celebration because that was when her child was supposedly most alert and happy. I rearranged my schedule and gave up my Saturday morning to make sure I could be there on time with everything ready. I arrived exactly at the listed start time with the chocolates, only to find the place completely empty. I double-checked the invitation to make sure I hadn't misread it, then called my friend. She told me, very casually, that the party time had been moved to the afternoon. She admitted she forgot to tell me and then added that I was the only guest who hadn't been notified about the change. That's when I really lost my patience. I had already sacrificed my morning, lost sleep, and put in a lot of unpaid labor for something that was supposed to be a gift. On top of that, we had been talking constantly about the party details for weeks. I had helped her plan the menu, estimate quantities, and organize things, and I had even lent her some of my own decorations for the cake table. Given how involved I was and how much communication there had been, it felt hard to believe that I was simply forgotten by accident. At this point, I haven't confirmed whether I'll even attend the afternoon version of the party. I'm honestly so annoyed that I don't feel like celebrating anymore, and the morning already feels wasted. Because the chocolates were meant to be the gift, I'm now wondering if it would be wrong to ask her to reimburse me after all for the ingredients and the time I put in, especially if I don't end up going later. I'm also considering just declining to attend altogether, saying I already have other plans, even though the truth is that I'm too frustrated to pretend everything is fine. I moved to this city not long ago and have been trying hard to build friendships, which makes the situation sting more. I've gone out of my way to be helpful and supportive, and this whole thing has left me feeling overlooked and taken for granted. I can't tell if I'm justified in feeling this upset or if I'm letting my emotions get the better of me. Was I wrong for asking my sibling to stop taking over every conversation? I have a close family group chat where we all talk regularly, and for the most part it's how we stay connected. My younger sibling has 2 very young children, and ever since her first pregnancy years ago, nearly every conversation somehow circles back to parenting. No matter what the original topic is, it almost always gets redirected to pregnancy, feeding schedules, exhaustion, or the kids themselves. When I try to share something important about my own life, the focus shifts quickly, and whatever I was talking about gets dropped entirely. This has happened repeatedly over the years. It happened when I shared news about my engagement, when I talked about starting a new job, when I mentioned health concerns, and even when I bought my first home. If she's awake and active in the chat, the conversation inevitably becomes about her experience as a parent. The only time it doesn't happen is when she's offline, which isn't often. Earlier this week, I found out that my workplace is going through major restructuring and my position may be at risk. I was extremely stressed and reached out in a group chat to vent and get advice from family members who have been in the workforce longer than I have. A few people responded and we were actually having a back and forth conversation, which felt really supportive in the moment. Then, suddenly, my sibling sent an unrelated photo of her youngest child with a caption about feeding time. Immediately, the entire discussion pivoted and everyone began responding to that instead. What made it sting more was that it was obvious the photo hadn't just been taken, which made it feel unnecessary and poorly timed. After years of this pattern, I finally felt overwhelmed. I sent her a private message asking if, just once, a conversation could stay focused on me without being redirected. She responded by telling me I needed to grow up and that not everything revolves around me. She then involved our parent, who told me I was being unfair and should have lightened up. Since then, it feels like the rest of the family has taken sides because now anything I say in the group chat is met with silence. I'm left feeling shut down and embarrassed for speaking up, even though this has been bothering me for a long time. I genuinely don't want to dismiss her life or our kids, but I also want space to be heard when I'm struggling. Was I wrong for backing out after the trip became something I could not afford? A few months after a really fun group getaway earlier this year, 3 of us started talking about planning another trip for the following year. By early autumn, we were excited and began outlining a simple, budget-friendly weekend plan that worked for all of us financially and schedule-wise. We were all on the same page and looking forward to it. Later on, we realized the specific activity we had planned would work better with 4 people instead of 3. One friend suggested inviting someone she knew and the rest of us agreed. At first, everything continued smoothly, and the new person seemed easygoing and enthusiastic about the original plan. Then, about a month later, she proposed changing the destination entirely. The new location was farther away, more expensive, and would turn a short weekend into a much longer trip. One friend immediately supported the change, while another friend and I were hesitant. For a while, the group was split evenly, but within a few days, I became the only person still uncomfortable with the new plan. I explained clearly and more than once that the updated destination would nearly double what I could afford to spend. I also shared that extending the trip into an extra week simply was not possible for me financially or with my responsibilities. I said that if the group really wanted to go ahead with the new plan, I understood, but I would need to step back. I was told that opting out would ruin the idea of travelling as a group of 4. To be clear, the new destination did sound great. If money and time were not an issue, I would have loved to go. But I was honest about my limits and did not want to stretch myself beyond what I could reasonably manage. I even spoke to each of the original friends privately, hoping we could compromise or revisit the original plan, but by then, the decision had already been made without me. After weeks of feeling unheard, I finally said I would cancel my participation because I could not afford the trip and did not want to put myself in financial stress. This was about 2 weeks before the planned date. With such short notice, finding affordable accommodations for the remaining group became difficult. Eventually, they decided not to go at all, saying there was no point in settling for something supper when the trip was no longer what they had planned. Now, it feels like the blame has quietly landed on me. The trip did not happen, and I cannot shake the feeling that everyone sees me as the reason it fell apart. At the same time, I know I was honest from the beginning about my budget and tried to communicate clearly and respectfully. I feel guilty, but I also feel like I was put in a position where my only options were to overspend or walk away. I am still unsure whether standing my ground was reasonable or if I truly spoiled something for everyone else. Was I wrong for leaving after my relative tried to control my daily routine? I agreed to stay with a family member by marriage for a few days to help out while her partner was out of the country for work. She has several young children, and since I live nearby and have a flexible schedule, I thought it would be helpful to stay over and assist with childcare and household tasks. At first, everything seemed fine, and I genuinely believed I was there to support her during a stressful period. For years, I've had a consistent daily habit of going on a walk. It's something I do no matter the weather or circumstances, usually for about half an hour, sometimes longer if conditions allow. While staying at her house, I continued this routine on a nearby path, shortening it compared to my usual walks and timing it during the kids' downtime so it wouldn't interfere with helping out. I even offered to watch the kids so she could take time for herself, but she brushed it off with comments that felt dismissive and oddly resentful. Over the next couple of days, her remarks became more pointed. She questioned whether I really walked every day, suggested it was excessive, and implied there was something unhealthy or anxiety-driven about it. One morning, I couldn't find my shoes. When I asked her about them later, she acted as though I had simply overlooked them, even though I was sure they hadn't been worse she claimed. I told her I didn't find the situation funny and went on my walk anyway. When I returned, she criticized me further, telling me I needed professional help and insisting that my routine was proof of an obsession. I asked her directly why my walks bothered her so much, and she said I was supposed to be there to help with the kids and that my absence, even though brief, was unfair to her. I explained again that my walks were short and scheduled carefully, but the tension didn't ease. The next morning, my shoes were missing again, this time after I'd placed them with my other belongings. That was the breaking point. I packed my things and left without making a scene. While driving home, she called and accused me of overreacting, being immature, and even made personal insults about my life choices. I told her I wasn't willing to play games or be controlled, but I would still help in limited ways if absolutely necessary. Now I'm being told by others that I took things too far, but I can't shake the feeling that hiding my belongings crossed a serious line. Was I wrong for saying no to a last-minute, middle-of-the-night airport ride? I've known my friend Marcus for years, and overall we've always had a solid relationship. A little over a week ago, I visited him out of state for my birthday, and he surprised me with an incredibly generous gift worth several $100s. I was genuinely touched by it and thanked him repeatedly, because it wasn't something I ever expected, and I know it came from a place of generosity rather than obligation. A few nights later, my phone rang in the middle of the night, jolting me awake around 3 a.m. I answered immediately because I assumed something was seriously wrong. Instead, Marcus asked if I could get dressed, hop in my car, and drive him to an airport that was nearly 2 hours away so he could catch an early morning flight. That would have meant a long drive there, turning around immediately and getting back home close to sunrise after being awake all night. I said no, told him I couldn't do that on such short notice, and went back to sleep. Later that morning, I woke up to a message from a mutual friend telling me Marcus was furious with me for refusing. Apparently, he felt that after the expensive birthday gift he had given me, I should have been willing to help him out, especially since I didn't have plans the next day. From his perspective, this was a favour between close friends that I should have said yes to without hesitation. From my side, the situation felt very different. Marcus is extremely well off and could easily afford a ride service or other transportation to the airport. This wasn't a sudden emergency or a situation where he had no alternatives, it was simply a preference to get home earlier. What bothered me most wasn't just the request itself, but the expectation that I would wake up from a dead sleep with zero warning and commit to a long and exhausting drive in the middle of the night. Had he asked me the day before, or even earlier that evening, I likely would have planned around it and agreed. Being put on the spot at 3 a.m. felt unreasonable. I only picked up the phone because I truly thought something serious had happened, and if it had been an actual emergency, I wouldn't have hesitated to help. But once I realized it was about transportation that he could easily arrange himself, I didn't feel right about doing it. Now there's tension, and I'm being told I was ungrateful and selfish for drawing that boundary, even though I still believe the request itself crossed a line. Was I wrong for snapping when someone mocked my wife at dinner? My wife is originally from Northern Europe, but her mother was born in Eastern Europe, and she inherited a lot of those features. Because of that, she stands out a bit where we live in the US. And people often assume she's from somewhere completely different. She's also fairly new to the country, and while we're married, she isn't eligible for citizenship yet. All of that is already a sensitive topic for her, especially since she's had moments where people made fun of her accent or pointed out things she doesn't understand culturally, which really hurts her. A few nights ago, I went out to dinner and drinks with some close friends. One of them brought along a long-time friend of his who was visiting town. I've known this guy casually for years, and I've never been fond of him. He's the type who prides himself on edgy humour, constantly pushing jokes past the point of being funny, especially once he's had a few drinks. I usually tolerate him because he's part of the extended friend group, but I already had a bad feeling going into the night. Almost immediately, he started asking about my wife, referring to her as my Russian wife, or whatever she is. I corrected him and briefly explained her background. He didn't seem interested in understanding and instead compared her to a famous political figure from Eastern Europe, which already felt dismissive. Then he joked about how much it cost to bring her to the US. A couple of people laughed, and I tried to brush it off with a sarcastic response, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Throughout the night, he kept circling back to her, calling her by that nickname, exaggerating her accent, and making jokes that were clearly leaning into stereotypes. Some of his questions were harmless, but they were buried under constant digs. I could tell others at the table were getting uncomfortable, but no one said anything. The final straw was when he joked that she'd probably leave me once she got what she wanted from being here, followed by jokes about immigration authorities showing up at our house and mocking the way she speaks. At that point, I lost it. I told him very bluntly to stop, and when he pushed back, I fired off some pretty harsh comments of my own. It escalated quickly, my voice got loud, and I am sure people nearby heard the whole thing. The mood was completely ruined, and the dinner basically ended after that. I felt bad for blowing things up, especially since my wife wasn't even there, but the idea of someone talking about her like that made my blood boil. I know how deeply those kinds of jokes affect her, and I couldn't let it keep going. Now I'm stuck feeling conflicted. On one hand, I regret causing a scene and derailing the night. On the other, I feel like letting this comment slide would have been a betrayal. I keep wondering if I should have handled it more calmly or pulled him aside instead of snapping publicly. So I can't help but ask myself, was I actually wrong for standing up for my wife the way I did? Was I wrong for taking my baby and leaving my parents' house? I'm a 20-something new mom with a 4-month-old son who arrived early and struggled with feeding at first. Because of that, I exclusively pump and bottle feed breast milk. It works well for him, but it means my schedule revolves around pumping 6 times a day, including overnight. Once he started sleeping in longer stretches and feeding reliably, my parents invited us to stay with them one night a week so I could get some uninterrupted rest. We agreed, and it became a regular thing. My father has always been incredible with babies and had everything set up to safely care for one overnight, so I trusted him completely. My mother, however, has a long history of being inattentive with other grandchildren in the family, and everyone has more or less agreed she shouldn't be left alone with kids. Even so, I decided to give her a chance with very clear limits. I was comfortable with her doing simple things like feeding or changing the baby, nothing more. A few weeks ago, after I came downstairs from a shower, I noticed she was feeding my son a bottle that felt unusually hot. When I asked about it, she brushed it off. I snapped a photo and sent it to my sister, who immediately said it looked like breast milk that had been reheated in a microwave. I calmly explained to my mother why microwaving breast milk isn't safe, including the risk of burns and nutrient loss. She said she understood, and I tried to move on. The following week, while cleaning up, I found another bottle near where she usually sits that had clearly been microwaved. This time I was more firm and told her that if it happened again, I would take the baby and leave. A few days later, early in the morning, I went to grab my pumping supplies and realized my son wasn't with my father or in his crib. I found my mother feeding him yet another bottle that had obviously been reheated the same way. I brought it upstairs to my husband, who agreed with me, and we immediately started packing. When we told my parents we were leaving, my mother denied everything and my father claimed he had prepared the bottle himself, even though I was certain that wasn't true. When I took my baby from her, she launched into a dramatic rant about how she must be a terrible person. We left, and I made it clear to my father that this wasn't about him and that I loved him. He was devastated because this is his first biological grandchild and they formed a strong bond. Later, my mother admitted to him that she had microwaved the milk, but she has refused to apologize or take responsibility. Instead, she's been telling other family members that I'm cruel and that I'm keeping her grandson from her. I'm heartbroken about how this has affected my dad, but I feel like I had to protect my child and follow through on a boundary I clearly set. Even so, with all the fallout and guilt being thrown my way, I can't help but wonder if I handled this wrong. Am I wrong for asking my friend to pay for the wine he drank while house-sitting? At 26F asked a friend 27M to stay at my place for a weekend to watch my cat. Before I left, I told him he could help himself to whatever in the kitchen. In my mind, that meant normal things: snacks, cereal, maybe a beer. Just basic hospitality. When I got home, I noticed that a $120 bottle of vintage Barolo I had been saving to celebrate an upcoming promotion was gone. Not half gone. Completely finished. He drank the whole thing by himself while hanging out and watching Netflix. When I brought it up, he said I had technically given him permission because it was in the kitchen and I'd told him to help himself. That felt like a stretch to me. To me, is a difference between grabbing chips or soda and opening a special occasion bottle of wine that's clearly more expensive than the rest. It just seemed like common sense not to have opened the nicest bottle in someone else's home without asking. I ended up sending him a Venmo request for $80 instead of the full $120 because I didn't want to be over the top about it. Now he's calling me tacky and telling our friend group I'm a bad host for charging him after I said he could help himself. It's not even entirely about the money. It's more about the principle. I feel like there's an unspoken rule that if you're a guest or house sitting, you don't consume the most expensive or special item available without checking first. He's acting like I'm being dramatic over just wine, but I can't help feeling like he took advantage of a casual offer. So, am I actually being unreasonable here? Am I wrong for refusing to move back in with my dad after his divorce? My mom passed away when I was an infant, so I don't remember her. Her older sister stepped up in a huge way and became my constant. I basically grew up with her as my safe person. When I was little, she lived nearby and I saw her all the time. When I was around 8, she relocated for work, and after that I travelled to see her often on weekends, school breaks, and we split summers. She always made the effort to keep me close. When I was 12, my dad remarried a woman named Karen. She had kids of her own. From the beginning, they pushed this idea that Karen was now my new mom and that I didn't need to keep visiting my aunt so much anymore. It felt forced and uncomfortable. Not long after the wedding, my dad gave my bedroom the bigger one to Karen's kids and expected me to move into a small shared space. I refused. Around the same time, they also made it harder for me to travel, saying I couldn't fly alone anymore, which meant my aunt had to either drive hours to get me or pay to fly out and escort me back. It became pretty clear to me that I wasn't the priority anymore. I felt like I was being squeezed into their new family instead of still being his daughter. A few months after the wedding, I made the decision to move in with my aunt full-time. It wasn't dramatic, it just felt obvious. I was happier, more stable, and actually felt wanted there. Now I'm 16. My dad and Karen are divorcing because she cheated, and he recently found out that the younger kids he thought were his aunt biologically related to him. He called me, crying, saying he misses me and asking me to come back home because he has no one left. He says I'm his only real family now. The thing is, I've built a life here. My aunt has been steady and supportive in ways my dad just wasn't. I love my school, I have solid friends, and we live close to several good universities, so I may not even need to move far for college. My aunt is also seeing someone who treats us both kindly. He comes over on weekends, cooks amazing food, and is even helping me fix up a car. It feels like a real, healthy environment. My dad and his relatives are saying I'm being cold and selfish. They argue that he's still my father and that he needs me now more than ever. But I can't shake the feeling that when he had to choose, he didn't choose me. And his divorce doesn't suddenly erase the way I was pushed aside before. I don't plan on changing my mind, but part of me wonders, does refusing to move back make me heartless? Was I wrong for refusing to report my cycle to my dad? When I was 12, my father decided that I needed to inform him and my older brother every single month when I started my period. We were a household of 6 at the time, 3 girls and 2 boys and my mother. He claimed that, as the men of the house, he and my brother had a right to know when I would be more emotional. I remember standing in the kitchen of our suburban Ohio home, mortified, trying to explain that it felt private. He shut that down immediately and told me it was disrespectful to keep that kind of information from him. According to him, it was about consideration. According to me, it felt humiliating. I didn't comply consistently, which led to repeated lectures about transparency and family communication. My mother never enforced it outright, but she sided with him philosophically, insisting that keeping the peace sometimes meant sharing things we'd rather not. Years have passed since then, and I now live in another state working as a graphic designer, far from that house and those rules. But the issue still lingers whenever it comes up in conversation. My father maintains he was justified. My mother still says it would have been the thoughtful thing to do. I can't shake the feeling that it was an overstep. I wasn't asking for help managing a medical condition. I wasn't hiding dangerous behavior. I just didn't want to announce something deeply personal to the men in my family so they could supposedly brace themselves for my mood. It made me feel like my body was public property, like my privacy ranked below their comfort. I've tried to let it go, but every time it's framed as me being stubborn or dramatic, I question myself all over again. Was it really unreasonable to want that boundary? Was I wrong for calling gold stable after my sister lost $1.0 following my advice? I'm 19M and have been trading for a few months. I'm up around 15%, nothing crazy, but decent for starting out. My sister 22F noticed and asked what she should do with her savings. I told her she could look into gold since it's generally considered more stable and less volatile than a lot of stocks or crypto. I didn't tell her to go all in, I just said it's usually seen as a safer investment compared to higher risk assets. She bought gold on January 22. The price ticked up a bit, so she felt confident and bought more on January 27. In total, she put in $10.0. Right after that, the price dropped around 10% in about a week. She panicked because $10 is a lot of money for her. On February 1, she sold everything, locking in a $1.0 loss. Not long after she sold, the price rebounded and is now higher than when she originally bought. Now she wants me to pay her back the $1.0. She says I misled her by describing gold as stable when it dropped that much in a short period. She claims she wouldn't have invested so heavily if I hadn't made it sound low risk. I told her that stable doesn't mean never goes down and that markets fluctuate. I also pointed out that she made the decision to sell during a dip rather than holding. I didn't force her to invest $10, and I definitely didn't tell her to panic sell. My mom, though, thinks I'm in the wrong for giving financial advice when I'm not qualified and says it's partially my fault she lost money. So now I'm stuck wondering, was I responsible for calling gold stable and giving input at all, or is she responsible for her own investment decisions and panic selling? Was I wrong for not changing the TV in my apartment's clubhouse for a mom and her kid? I'm 25 and live in an apartment complex that has a shared clubhouse with a big TV. I work from home, so I use the space pretty often. At some point, I logged into one of my streaming accounts on the clubhouse TV and even made a separate profile specifically labeled for residents so other people could use it if they wanted. On Super Bowl Sunday, I walked over to the clubhouse expecting it to be packed. Surprisingly, it was completely empty. I'm not even a huge football fan, but since it's such a big event, I figured someone would show up eventually to watch. So I turned the game on and sat down, planning to watch for a bit and then leave it on for whoever came by later. About halfway through the second quarter, a woman in her 40s came in with her young son, maybe 3 years old. She sat right next to me. I assumed she was there for the game. Instead, she sighed and asked, "Are you watching this?" Before I could fully answer, she started looking for the remote and said, "We don't have a smart TV at home, so we'd like to use YouTube on this TV." Now here's the thing, I truly did not care about the Super Bowl. I had zero emotional investment. I could have walked back to my apartment and been perfectly fine. But something about her tone immediately rubbed me the wrong way. It felt less like a request and more like an assumption that I'd move. So I said, "Yes, I'm watching this. It's the Super Bowl tonight." She replied, "Right, but we can't get what we need on TV at home, and the Super Bowl is on everywhere. So do you mind?" I told her I understood, but I had gotten there first and was enjoying my time. That's when she said this was a community space and that we needed to respect each other in communal areas, and that it wasn't respectful to hold it. I responded that if she planned to use a communal space for something specific on a major TV night, she should have made sure she arrived first. I even invited her to stay and watch, mentioning the halftime show was coming up. She ended up moving to another table and sat on her phone while her son kept asking to watch his show. I'll admit, hearing him ask made me feel guilty. After about 30 minutes of tense silence, she muttered something under her breath and left. Looking back, I know I could have just given in. I didn't actually care about the game. I think my reaction was more about feeling pushed than about football. But at the same time, it is a shared space, and I was already there using it for a pretty widely expected event. So now I'm wondering if I let pride win over practicality. Was I wrong for standing my ground when I could have easily gone home and let the kid watch YouTube? Was I wrong for not letting a woman with 2 items cut in front of me at the grocery store? Earlier today, I was at a packed grocery store. Only 2 registers were open, and the lines were long. I had a full cart and had already been waiting for about 15 minutes by the time I finally reached the conveyor belt. Right as I started unloading my groceries, a woman walked up holding just a carton of eggs and a gallon of milk. She asked if she could go ahead of me because she was in a huge rush and only had 2 items. Normally, I might not have cared. But I was exhausted, my back was hurting, and I'd already waited my turn like everyone else. So I told her, "Sorry, but I've been waiting here for 15 minutes and I just want to get home." She immediately looked offended and started complaining loudly to the people behind me, saying things like some people are just miserable, then that it would have taken her 30 seconds. To my surprise, the guy directly behind me actually chimed in and called me a jerk for not being neighborly. That caught me off guard. I didn't insult her. I didn't snap. I just said no. From my perspective, the whole point of a line is that everyone waits their turn, regardless of how many items they have. Stores even create express lanes for small purchases. This wasn't one of them. If I let her go, what happens if the next person also has 3 items? Or 4. Where's the line? At the same time, I know it would have been a quick transaction, and maybe it would have been the kinder move. The public reaction made me second-guess myself. So now I'm wondering, was I standing on principle, or was I just being unnecessarily stubborn? Was I wrong for actually trying when my date told me not to go easy on her? For context, I 24 and play pool regularly and at a fairly competitive level. 2 of the guys I practice with compete in national tournaments, so I'm used to playing serious games. I don't consider myself a pro, but I'm definitely above average. Last Saturday I went on a date with a woman who had mentioned she liked playing pool. I suggested a pool bar I know well. We met up, grabbed some drinks, and started playing. At first, I was taking it easy, just enjoying the vibe, not overthinking shots, keeping it fun and relaxed. After a few casual games and some food, I mentioned that a couple of my friends compete at nationals. That's when she smiled and said, "Okay, next game, don't go easy on me." So I adjusted. I didn't go full tournament mode, but I made my play more precise, better positioning, fewer risky shots. She still had chances, and the games were competitive. Right before we left, we decided to rack up one last game. I sank 2 stripes off the break, and had a clean layout. Since she'd said not to go easy on her, I just played it straight through the way I normally would. I ended up clearing the table in one run. We finished our drinks, I paid, and drove her home. On the ride back she was noticeably quieter, but I figured she was just tired. When I got home, I saw a message from her saying, "I asked you not to go easy on me, but I didn't mean turn it into a statement." It honestly felt a bit like an ego thing at the end, and it made me uncomfortable. That genuinely surprised me. From my perspective, I just respected her request. I wasn't trash-talking, celebrating, or trying to embarrass her. I had a good break and played it out cleanly. I even paid for the night and kept things polite and low-key. I responded explaining that it wasn't about ego, I just took her at her word and played normally. She hasn't replied. Now I'm wondering if I misread the situation. Was I supposed to balance competitiveness with keeping it socially safe? Or is it reasonable to take someone at their word when they say not to go easy on them? So, was I in the wrong for playing my best that last game? Was I wrong for opening a new bank account without telling my mom after she kept taking my money? I'm 19 and trying to get my finances under control for the first time in my life. Growing up, my parents didn't let me work during high school because they wanted me focused on academics. I did well, I graduated valedictorian, but it also meant I never really had control over my own money. A few years ago, my grandmother gave me about $7 a year to help me get started with college. Anytime I had checks or cash to deposit growing up, my mom would put it into a joint savings account that she said was mine, but I didn't have direct access to it. When I finally went to open my own checking account at 18, my mom came with me and suggested we just keep the existing savings account joint. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I checked the balance, there was only about $1 left. She had previously told me she occasionally borrowed from it and would pay it back, and I believed her. I had no idea the balance had dropped that much. Not long after that, my old 1999 Mercury Grand Marquis finally died. My mom's side of the family pushed hard for me to get a new car. I was hesitant, especially when I found out the monthly payment would be around $900, but I was told I wouldn't have to shoulder the full amount right away. My dad and his mom gave me another $7, $500 to help, and my mom's parents put about $3 down on the car. Recently, I was told that the money from my dad and grandmother had run out and that I'd need to start contributing again. I've been actively job hunting, applications, interviews, the works, but since I didn't have job experience in high school, I've had trouble landing something stable. I've been doing DoorDash in the meantime, but it's inconsistent. I also received about $2 back from my college financial aid refund. I wanted to set some aside for daily expenses and use a portion to plan something special for my partner for Valentine's Day. When the refund hit my account, my mom immediately insisted the money needed to go toward the car and said I couldn't use it freely. Because the savings account is still joint, I technically needed her approval to move funds. I transferred $200 for some early shopping and date plans. A few days later, I checked my account and nearly all of the refund was gone, about $50 remained. When I confronted her, she said I should have listened to her and that I couldn't be trusted with my own money. She also brought up the fact that I moved in with my dad recently and implied that if I wanted independence, I should be prepared to cover the entire $900 monthly car payment myself. At this point, I'm seriously considering opening a completely separate account at a different bank without telling her, just so I can have control over my own finances. I feel conflicted because she insists she's trying to teach me responsibility, but it feels more like I'm being shut out of decisions about my own money. So, am I wrong for wanting to open a new account and handle my finances independently? Was I wrong for refusing to let my younger brother move into my flat for free? I'm 27 and live alone in my own flat. I've been there since 2019 and have built a comfortable life for myself. My younger brother Dave is 19 and still lives with our mum. He doesn't pay rent, doesn't contribute to food, and generally has no real financial responsibilities. The only thing he reliably pays for is when he goes out to eat or drink. Lately, he and our mum have been constantly arguing. I only know how bad it's gotten because they both call me separately to complain about each other. Some of it is genuinely petty, like him calling her awful names because she asked him to wash dishes. My mum recently suggested that Dave move into my flat temporarily for about 8 weeks. The idea would be to convert my living room into a second bedroom for him. I immediately dismissed it. First, based on how he behaves at home, I have serious doubts about what he'd be like in my space. Second, there are financial consequences. If he moves in, I lose my single-person council tax discount, which would significantly increase my monthly expenses. On top of that, he'd bring his gaming PC and use more electricity. Realistically, the extra costs would add up to around £400 a month, and that's before factoring in food. I actually discussed this with Dave before the current arguments escalated. I told him if he ever moved in, he'd need to contribute around that amount to cover increased bills. He flat out refused, assuming he'd live with me for free. Now that tensions at home are worse, my mum keeps pushing the idea of him staying with me temporarily. But I don't believe it would actually be temporary. Even his lack of urgency to work or pay his way now, I can easily see it stretching far beyond 8 weeks. I suggested that if things are so bad, our mum could set firmer boundaries or even ask him to move out since he's an adult. She refuses and instead keeps pressuring me to step in. Recently, I ran into Dave and the topic came up again. During the conversation, he casually said that if our mum died tomorrow, he wouldn't care. That comment honestly shocked me and made me even more hesitant about inviting that energy into my home. Now I'm stuck wondering if I'm being selfish by protecting my space and finances, or if I'm simply setting reasonable boundaries. So, was I wrong for refusing to house him for free and potentially letting their conflict continue?